I married my high school sweetheart right out of high school, who went into the military. And coming from a small town, everyone knew each other. I knew that we were going to kind of grow up together. What was, I guess, unexpected for me was the abuse. And the first time that my ex-husband had hit me, I left. I immediately left. But then I noticed over the years that I wound up getting pulled back in. There was just pushing and shoving at first, locking me in rooms, and then it escalated into a lot of hitting, things that resulted in me being in the hospital. Right after 9/11, we left and went to Mannheim, Germany. And again, this is January of 2002. So things were still very new. Our country was still very confused and hurting about what was going on here. And I found myself in this new country, not speaking the language, clearly away from my family, and being abused. I met a spouse during the welcome, and she kind of pulled me into this circle of women. The FRG stands for Family Readiness Group. And that's kind of where I found my community and my voice to stand up for what was going on. For the most part, the FRG was really about the women coming together and figuring out how to navigate being in this new country, learning the language, going shopping, understanding the culture there, what we should or shouldn't do, can we get a license and drive, things like that. For the most part, it really was just a support group to understand military culture in a different country. Never did I imagine that it would also be a support group for those of us that were hurting, that were in bad situations in terms of abuse and needed help. Interestingly enough, my ex-husband was never received any type of punitive damage. The response from the military was always to let him go to the barracks and cool off for a couple of days. Every single time. Every single time. He was able to retire after 21 years honorably out of the military. So in terms of justice as far as domestic violence, it was never served, not for myself or my children. I was 32 years old when I commissioned. I went to BOLC at Fort Lee, Virginia, and I arrived at my next duty station, my first duty station, which was Fort Stewart, Georgia, in December of 2011. And for every officer and every soldier that comes in, you have to do your in-processing. For officers, we're given a little bit more leeway. The person in charge told us that we could go off and do our in-processing ourselves. We didn't have to stick around. So he kind of invited himself into the situation and said, hey, I've been here before, I know where I'm going, we can do this in processing together. And so we did. He presented himself to me as an ally who would help me out, navigate everything that was going on. My children at the time were not with me. They were still in Maryland, waiting for me to get housing and get settled in. And my children arrived just before Christmas. And this person, again, inserted himself into the situation of, I want to be able to help you, school, get your children settled, things like that. I was scheduled to have dental surgery, which was pretty major for myself. It was a root canal that had gone wrong in the military, and it had to fix a lot of things. The day that I had my surgery, my perpetrator had texted me and said, hey, I would like to come by and check on you, which I was totally okay with. My children were there. There was no reason for me not to feel safe. What transpired was him coming to my house at night. My children were asleep. And from there, he forced me into my laundry room where he assaulted me while my children were sleeping in my home. I hadn't been at Fort Stewart for 90 days, so I had no idea where to go. So I went to the one place that I thought that, I could find safety and comfort, which was my chaplain. Unfortunately, that was not the place to go. And I wind up having to go somewhere else and retell my story again to a civilian person who told me that I had to tell someone in a green suit. So there was just a lot of back and forth and confusion for me in where I'm supposed to go. I didn't come forward right away. I was terrified. I knew he outranked me. I knew he was familiar with the people in my unit. So I filed a restricted report. What transpired over the next couple of months is not uncommon. The retaliation came from within inside my own unit, from my own commander. They were making comments during formation. I was given less assignment, moved from one assignment to another. And meanwhile, he was continuously stalking me, threatening me, sending text messages. Something inside of me said something is wrong. So I went back to my bedroom, and that's where I found all of my underwear laying out on my bed. I called the housing and I asked them, can I change the locks on my home because I think someone broke in? I was told no. You have to file a police report. I didn't want to do that. So I kind of mulled it over and said, okay, I'm going to call the MPs. So I called the MPs and I told them, I believe someone broke into my home. I want to be able to change the locks on my house, but I need a police report. Well, the MPs told me that unless I tell them who did it or suspected who did it, that they would not file the report. And I'm terrified at this point. My daughter came home from school the next day crying in tears about being bullied. And as I'm having this conversation with my daughter about standing up for herself, it hit me that I was not doing that for me. And that's when I filed an unrestricted report and came forward with everything that he did, pictures, the text messages, voicemails. And I said, enough is enough. My trial took 2 years. So from 2012 till 2014, I was at Fort Hood and not allowed to deploy. I wasn't given any kind of special assignments. Again, it just looked like I showed up to work every day. So even after my trial, when it was time for me to promote, HRC said no. Why would we promote you to a captain? You've done absolutely nothing. They're not privy to what happens when someone is assaulted or go through trial. So all they know is what my leaders write down, which was essentially I showed up to work every day. So I had to fight extremely hard to be promoted. The battalion commander at the time was just amazing. He knew, but he never treated me like a victim. And when it came time for my promotion, he wrote a letter. I think by then he was a 1-star. He wrote the letter to HRC to help me get promoted to captain. So here I am thinking that I'm going to be able to still serve and move past this. In 2014, I went back to Fort Stewart for my trial. My perpetrator was sent to prison. He received 5 years, plus probation and a registered sex offender. But the cost of it was my entire career. Nightmares were my first indication that something was wrong. But I thought I could control nightmares. Nightmares were at night. I can still do my job during the day. There was no reason for me to alert anyone. I was going to mental health. I was introduced to EMDR training to help with PTSD. So I'm preparing, like everyone else in 1st Cav, to get our units ready to deploy. And as I walk into the TOC area, someone looked just like my perpetrator. And I just lost all agency of my body and my mind, and I ran out crying. I was shaking. I ran to the barracks area, and another major came in, and she literally sat next to me on the bed and held me. And she said, I understand. Meanwhile, my leadership is trying to figure out what to do with me. And I'm like, I just need to talk to someone. I'm already going to mental health, and I'm asking them, I want to stay. I just need to talk to someone. I don't know what's going on with me, but I just want to talk to someone. And he told me no. So they put me on a plane the next day, sent me back to Fort Hood. And there I was met with a counseling statement for conduct unbecoming of an officer. I was so confused. What in the world did I do that was conduct unbecoming? She sent me a message and told me I was acting like a private, and that officers don't do things like this. They decided that I was not good enough to be in the Army any longer. From that time until the next year, it took approximately a year for me to be medically retired out of the military. They were absolutely certain that I was not going to recover or could serve. When people see me, even now when I speak, the feedback that I get is, "We weren't expecting you." I'm not exactly sure what people expect when they see someone who's been through so much. This idea that the person is going to look broken or look like they've got hit by a train or speak in small, quiet tones. I want to be loud about what happened. I want to really tell people, one, just shed the stereotypes of what assault looks like. My assault wasn't brutal. I didn't walk away with bruises or cuts. The survival instinct for me was to protect my children. What I was thinking while he was assaulting me was not fight back. It wasn't run. All I was thinking was, if my son wakes up, what will he do to them? My instinct was to protect my children, not myself. And every person's story is very different. The outcome, the before, the during, and the after is just very different. And because of that, we can shed this idea that all assaults look the same, or that they're all violent, or that the person who was the victim stays in this victimhood. No, some of us are actually out here doing the work. All of us are trying to do the work. And some of us are just taking our stories and really trying to put that into implementable change to make sure that someone else, but the person behind us, doesn't have to do this, doesn't have to go through this.